I've spent most of my life as an atheist, believing there was no God, no afterlife, absolutely nothing, and we were all here as just random chance and probability. It was for about 16 years of my life, well, almost not the majority, give it a few years. And a lot of it came from some of my upbringing of not having any sort of religious foundation. So my parents, they brought us to church every so often, my sister and I, as I was a child. And all I really remember was going off to the children's room, coloring some stuff, eating some snacks, playing some games. There was literally no theological or spiritual development out of that. And after some time, I noticed my father stopped going as well. And no one really talked about why, but of course I always saw him stay home and I wanted to stay home too. And I would ask if I could stay home. Answer was no, and no one would explain why my dad didn't go with us. So fast forward a little bit, and I was about 12 years old when I started going down the route of atheism. And I reached that conclusion not because I looked into religions like a proper atheist would. Nope, I was the common atheist who just looked around at everything, and I could not comprehend how God could exist in a world that was so full of suffering and hate and malice and depravity. It's kind of a common question, actually. Why would God allow so much suffering? And that has an answer, but we're not getting into that right now. So bearing witness to the world as such a wise 12-year-old adolescent child, I concluded that religion was just people's explanation of the world, that historically these peoples tried to understand the world and believed it was God and invisible, but we have science now to answer a lot of those questions. I also believe spiritually there was nothing there. It was just all superficial, made people feel good. However, I found out clearly, now that I'm Catholic, that I was wrong. And so this trend continued. Around 12, 13 years old, I actually had a strong bout with depression and suicidal thoughts. It felt like it continued for close to a year, if I'm not mistaken, in my recollection. But I finally melted down from the depression. My mom helped me work through it. I still was an atheist, and I powered forward just with the belief that, well, at least I have a life. I don't feel like it's worth living, but I have a life. I might as well try it out, you know? And so with that thought, I continued on. In high school, I went through another bout of depression. It was, again, about a year. Suicidal thoughts, same run-of-the-mill stuff with that one for me. And I ended up getting through that, but still ended up not religious. And I continued this, for quite a long time. And eventually I stumbled across a Christian friend of mine. I was actually asking him weightlifting advice. I knew he was Christian. We had some brief conversations. I always shut the conversations down, claiming that I felt that people wouldn't understand my perspective. In reality, I knew that I couldn't defend myself. I knew that I knew absolutely nothing. And I just had my assumptions, and I just knew I wasn't ready for combat, so to speak, wasn't suited for a debate. But regardless, he understood my perspective. I knew where he was at, and so we just really never talked about much with religion. One day, my friend asked if I would help him work through a family event, and he did note that there would be some spiritual religious aspects to it. And I appreciated the respectful approach, and I said, sure. And I was also, honestly, a little curious. And so, not going to get into all the details. However, he was at least talking about a confrontation he and some family members had. And he was referring to some of the spiritual warfare that people go through, some of the influence from the enemy that creates anger, wrath, envy, etc. It was very interesting to hear that. I had never heard a spiritual side, especially a side that acknowledges the enemy. I always hear, oh, Jesus loves you, Jesus died for us on the cross, believe in God, all that stuff that we're all used to hearing. But I hadn't heard that before about spiritual warfare and such combat. And that always made an impression on me after that conversation. I was kind of quiet about it, but years later I brought it up and he chuckled about it, of course, that I held on to that. And another thing during my time as an atheist, I had multiple spiritual experiences. I can at least count 5. I saw apparitions, so to speak, a silver one, also a dark one that I saw multiple times. Different interactions, sleep paralysis episode. I still disregarded a lot of that. And I thought that there was no God, no afterlife, in spite of all those experiences. And it was nice to come to terms with the fact that, well, nope, those were real. And so despite those experiences, I continued onwards as an atheist for quite a long time. My conversion really started to pull me out of atheism into what I call a short round of agnosticism. Interestingly, agnosticism means I don't know, basically. moving forward, I had a health issue for about 10 years up until then. Again, I was 28, and so it started when I was about 17, 18 years old, and where I was drinking 2 to 3 gallons of water a day, regardless if I was in a laborious day or not. And if I tried to scale back the water, because obviously 2 to 3 gallons of water a day is abnormal, I ended up with dehydration symptoms and at one point almost passed out from heat stroke until I got some water. And I had gone through multiple doctors and they all said, well, you're thirsty, drink a lot of water, it makes sense to me. And I just chalked it up to that. And so my family moved up to Idaho in 2020. I got set up with a new doctor, a more naturopathic doctor, I think is what they call him. And I was doing the run-of-the-mill, so to speak, onboarding. She asked, is there any health issues? And generally, I'm blessed to be very healthy. And so this little thought hit my head of, mention the water thing, even though it's been 3-4 doctors and no one wants to help. And she surprised me. She said, well, let's do some blood work, but while we wait for the blood work, try eating organic food. She did say, she notes that it's more expensive, but it's worth a shot if I'm willing to make the investment. You know, I figured, why not? A month of eating organic food while I wait for blood work, it's gonna hit my pocketbook, but what's it hurt? And so my wife and I, we switched to organic food. So within 4 to 6 weeks, I was sitting there at my desk and I had a routine where normally it was about every 30 to 45 minutes, and I would drink my entire water bottle, go to the bathroom, take a long moment there, and then go fill up my water, sip the top of it, fill it back up, go back to my desk, and again, repeat every 30, 45 minutes. Well, again, after 4 to 6 weeks, I was sitting there one day and I noticed it had been at least 2 hours since I got up, and I felt weird. Weird in the sense of this is unusual. And so I felt a weird inclination. I went and got up and tried to pee, and there wasn't really much because I hadn't been drinking gallons of water. I noted that, and so it was weird. And so I actually tracked the water a bit, and I noticed I was under a gallon a day. And I was shocked. Just simply switching to organic foods helped me with the health problem that we found out later on was literally killing my kidneys. And it made me wonder, how many other health problems do we have because of food? I know I was blessed to have my health rectified with that, but what about others? Would they be in the same boat just by switching to organic food? Yes, I acknowledge that a lot of our food is tainted by human hands in the sense that it's been engineered through crossbreeding. And I noticed that the food that we eat naturally derived from the earth has a health impact that's a positive impact versus the negative impact that chemically treated food has on our bodies. So that got me thinking there's an order to the world, an order that might be more than probability. Because if we just, so to speak, leave the world alone, things might go a little better. It's almost as if the world was created for us by someone. And I naturally attributed the name to that creator as God. So I went through a short round of agnosticism. It was probably about a year. And just kind of trying to reflect and figure things out. And I thought I was so smart figuring it out. And actually got kind of close, but also the difference was very vast. And I continued this where I was just reflecting and I was believing that God is an energy around the world. Oh, look at that, the Holy Spirit. And with time, and it was about 2022, my great aunt died on my mom's side. She didn't have any direct descendants of herself, but she did have sons and daughters through a man that she married. My mom was the closest one to her in our lineage, so my mom helped with the estate. My great aunt, she was blessed to be 86 years old and had a very fruitful, loving life, and she was a good Catholic woman. In order to manage the estate, my mom went ahead of my dad and I about a week before the funeral and was working with some of the other family members to deal with the paperwork, and also people were going through the estate, determining what they wanted to keep and this and that. And so by the time my dad and I got up there, my mom just said, well, everything is free for the taking. Everyone's had the chance to walk through, so if something's there, it's free for the taking unless someone else has it in their pile. She did say, go ahead and ask people if you think that you found something that someone might be interested in. And just check with people, especially with the husband side of the family, on certain things that were his. And this became pertinent because I had gone through the house multiple times throughout the weekend and I felt like I was done, but I had one extra inclination of just go and check one more time. And so I went through the rooms, didn't find anything, but on the way back through the hallway, I noticed a bookshelf about yay high, roughly 30 inches. I had all sorts of family Bibles in it. I had always wanted to read the Bible, and during my time as an atheist, my intention was to debunk it. And After I was an atheist, still had the inclination to read the Bible out of a holy curiosity to know what's in it and just to learn. But I just never had. And my friend suggested that I read the King James Version. And in this stack of Bibles that I found in my aunt's estate was a King James Version given to my uncle in 1952. And I went around and asked all the family members, all of his direct descendants, if they wanted it. It was signed to him, and it was a 1952 leather-bound Bible. Every single one of them said no. They said, you can have it. And well, I wasn't letting it go to an estate sale, so I kept it along with the other family Bibles. And when we got home, I set them all on the bookshelf and kind of forgot about them a little bit. I was conscious of them, but didn't really have any conscious intention of reading them. I was reading other books at the time. Ironically, I was reading a Hooker book, Hooker's biography, that I got from the same estate. And once I finished that, one night I was up alone. My wife and kids were all asleep. And can't really explain much of it, can't really describe much of it. I should say that I basically just got up, went, and grabbed the Bible off the shelf. I was thumbing through it. I was looking at all the different things that were put in there. There were different images, notes, letters, just in different parts. I just left it all intact. I noticed a ribbon on the spine that was used as a bookmark. I think it was in the book of Isaiah. I don't know where in the book of Isaiah or which book specifically, honestly, but I just know I read through the passages and honestly none of it made sense, which is a sensible thing, so to speak, when I have no understanding of the Bible. And then I went to page 1 and started reading. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and I continued on through the creation story. Of course, God, as it's noted, God created the world in 7 days. Obviously, 7 days on earth. To science, that earth was not created in 7 days, and the creation story of Adam and Eve kind of unsettled me of, did we all really come from one man and one woman? Et cetera, like Noah's Ark, just kind of wild story, so to speak. And if it wasn't for my Christian friend, I probably would have shut it, put it on a shelf, and never looked at it again. But I was inquiring with him. I asked him, you believe all this stuff, that the world was created in 7 days, Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark? And he said, yeah, he does. And he explained that, well, a day to us is 24 hours on earth. A day to the eternal God, that's entirely different. Time is a blink of an eye to him, and there goes millions and billions of years. And we were talking back and forth, and basically that there's more 7 stages, so to speak, that he went through to create the heavens and the earth. And it made sense because, when he created the fowl, the birds of the air, we see dinosaur fossils, we see a relationship. Well, it would be quite a logical thing to believe that, well, through God's creation, he created the dinosaurs to create the birds. Kind of makes sense to me. But anyway, so my friend said, sometimes you just got to take a leap of faith and go from that. And so I did just that. I thought, well, let's see what this is all about. And I continued onward. The Bible, when I went into it, I expected to be a lot of precepts, looking for cool heaven and hell stories, of course, and this and that. It took a while to get to the cool stories of heaven and hell. Those were more revelation at the very end. But nonetheless, it was mostly a lot of narrative. There are, of course, some books of a lot of precepts. There's songs in the Psalms. There's the precepts in Proverbs, the laws given in the book of Leviticus. But there was a lot of narrative. And it was quite an interesting read. Something else during my initial reading, I was, of course, as I said, reading kind of in secret. My family was all asleep, and so each night, go and put the boys down. My wife would lay down in bed, and I'd just get up and I'd say, I'm going to go read. Didn't tell her what. She was raised culturally Catholic, and she was more agnostic at the time. She was definitely uncomfortable with Christianity. And so one night, sitting there reading a leather-bound Bible, she came out from the room. And I thought, well, maybe she's just going to think it's another book, holding a leather-bound black Bible with fine print and a ribbon on it. Yeah, it was a dead giveaway. She went to the bathroom, walked back, saw, and she, with a somewhat disgusted look on her face, said, why are you reading the Bible? And I just shrugged awkwardly and said, oh, that's kind of interesting. I always wanted to read it, so I figured I'd read it. So the next morning, this continued a little bit every morning, in the weekends at least. I would talk about some of my conversations with my friends, some of my reading, and just digest it and process it in front of her and with her. And she was always very apprehensive and standoffish. She wasn't quite sure what to make of it. I was still going to continue reading it. And I started making certain changes to our lives secretly, so it didn't always work out perfectly, like honoring Sundays as God commanded and other aspects of life. Just wondering a lot about what's in there. There's a lot of animal sacrifices, and also my curiosity about that was, should we start doing animal sacrifices again? Why are we not doing those? I didn't do animal sacrifices, and I just held off and figured there'd be some conclusion to it, so to speak, and there was through Jesus Christ. I continued reading and just was going through the Old Testament, and at this point, since my wife knew that I was reading, I was more open about it, and so I had a reading light and I would read it in bed there, and it would throw her off when I'd be sitting there reading the Bible and just start laughing hysterically. Because yes, there are many moments in the Bible that are very funny. There are also many moments that make you go, ooh, ah. There's a lot of good stuff. If you haven't read it, I do recommend it. It's Bible in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, and you can also just pick it up, follow the Jeff Cavan's Bible timeline, all sorts of different options. I did learn the Bible is not meant to be read linearly, page 1 through the end, but it worked for me. And so my wife, she started going on her own little journey. I was at a job site and working, and my wife texted me one day. This was in November of 23. Do you want to go to Catholic Mass on Sunday? Well, I wasn't ready to go to church. I was still reading the Old Testament. I'd accepted God the Father, hadn't really gone towards Jesus Christ yet. I was working on things. My personal goal was to read the whole Bible before I go to a church. And I also wanted to be anything but Catholic, A, B, C. I was thinking about going to the Orthodox church down the street from us, and well, now my wife was getting on board, so I was a little confused. Scratch that, very confused. So I asked her what's going on, and she said, well, we'll talk about it later. And so got home and everything and had some private time with her, and she told me that she was talking to a friend, my friend's wife actually, and she was interested in joining the church more based on trying to find a community for our children. Although we were atheistic agnostic at the time, or going into this time I should say, we were conservative and we were worried about the secular world touching our children. Well, that's a loaded statement. We also were worried about religion. We knew there were conservative groups, however they were typically religious, which we were concerned about with that, with our children. But when she was talking with her friend, she was expressing her concerns, and her friend said, well, the church communities do offer what you're looking for, a conservative community that's really good for families. And so my wife was mainly seeking after that. And we spoke and we agreed, okay, let's not do Catholic Mass yet. I said, I'm not ready for church. She wasn't ready for worship at that point. We just held off and waited, but she continued on her own journey while I was reading the Bible. She decided she was going to go through with her Catholic roots and go for the Rosary. And she started learning about the Rosary and started praying it. And so, mind you, at this point, I had no prayer life. I had no idea how to pray. The only idea I had was you should be kneeling quietly in a room and no one's around you and speaking audibly to God, hands clasped, good little precious moments image. And she was going with the Rosary, and so she was going, it was about a week, and she came out from the bedroom and her eyes were wide, and she said, babe, I smell lilies. And I said, okay, what's that mean? Again, I was still in the Old Testament. And she said, that's Mary's flower. And I could see it click in her eyes. Because we don't have flowers, we don't have air fresheners, we don't have any of that. So for her to just randomly smell lilies strongly is very significant. And I saw it click in her eyes that she got it. She was searching and she got it. And I thought we were on the same level. Well, no, we weren't. I would find that out later. And so I watched her take off in a very positive way that made me uncomfortable. So again, I had no prayer life, and so she started introducing family prayer routines in the morning and evening. She printed out some prayer sheets with Catholic prayers, and I was very uncomfortable. We had these free rosaries she got, and I had no idea what to do. I just went with it. I was like, all right, I guess I just need to run with this and learn how it is. I didn't really understand how uncomfortable I was till my wife pointed out after the fact when I did get comfortable. So it was around January of 24 when we started attending Catholic Mass. Went to one church, wasn't really for us. Went to another church that we found, and it was beautiful, and we've been blessed to call the church home. And I was still wanting to check out Orthodoxy, and she said no, that if she was going to do this, she was going to go the Catholic route. So I just resigned myself, but also in hindsight, there wasn't any guidance from the Holy Spirit saying, no, go to the Orthodox church. I could just feel there wasn't a pull, and so I just went with it. And I do have to say, despite that being my intro into the Catholic Church, every time I learn about dogma, history, theology, etc., it all points to the Catholic Church being the one true church, in my humble opinion. And I try and look with a clear lens. One of my Christian friend actually, he's gone to the Orthodox Church, and so because of love of him, I've been very open in learning about the Orthodox side, and because of his Protestant background, I've also been soft and loving in learning about the Protestants. And so looking at all, again, the Catholic Church is the one true church in my humble opinion. So anyway, we started going in about January of 2024 to Catholic Mass, and it was interesting. I just was going with it. I was going through the Catholic calisthenics of up, down, bow, stand, all that. We were just going through it, and my wife, every so often, she would bring up the Rosary, and I thought Mary was for women, Rosary's for girls. I don't need that. It was April, the first weekend in April. We were on the way back from Mass in 2024, and she mentioned it again in a little more challenging way due to the way the conversation was going, and I said, okay, fine. Teach me tonight after the kids are down. And so we put the boys to sleep, came out to the living room. I said, all right, teach me how to pray the Rosary. So she gave me a little pamphlet, gave me our plastic rosary beads, and she ran me through it a bit and showed me. I was like, okay. So I resolved myself that the next day, Monday, I would wake up early and pray the Rosary in the nice quiet of the morning. I woke up, made my coffee, did my usual, went to the office, sat at my desk, pulled up a meditation online for some rosary meditations, and I grabbed the rosary beads, made the sign of the cross, and was ready to just pray a bunch of Hail Marys and feel nothing. And so I started praying the first joyful mystery, the Annunciation of Angel Gabriel to the Blessed Virgin. And I was going through, I didn't even make it like 3 Hail Marys, and I had to pause. I was very unexpectedly choked up. My eyes had water in them. That water was dripping down my tears. And I could feel the warmest, sweetest, softest embrace ever while I thought I was alone. But I wasn't. Mary was waiting for me, and I had reached out and connected to her through her rosary. And so I continued onward through the rest of the rosary that morning, talking to her, feeling her love and embrace, and just completely emotionally choked up. I finished the rosary and was just contemplating what had happened. And my wife came out, and I went and met her, and she saw the water on my face and asked if everything was okay. And I choked up and just said, she hugged me. And my wife now could see in my eyes what I saw in her eyes, that it clicked, it made sense. Although I was still in the Old Testament, I knew that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, because the only reason Mary has that touch is because she is the Mother of God. And my wife got to watch my prayer life take off. She saw my devotion to the Rosary grow, the devotion to the Blessed Virgin grow, and her Son, Jesus Christ. And it was beautiful. My wife and I have been blessed to go through faith together and really feed off each other in a positive way. I continued my readings, finished the whole Bible. My wife and I invited my mom to Easter Mass, and she also, apparently neither of us were baptized, so we were blessed to go through the sacraments together, my mother and I, and receive baptism, confirmation, communion, all at the same time. It was a very big blessing. And I also want to touch on some of my theological discernment as well as I was going through this, because there's a lot of different religions out there. One of my apprehensions prior to becoming Catholic is, well, why do you think you know who the one true God is when there's all these other gods out there? Why do you think the other gods are fake and artificial, superficial? Well, apparently that's not actually the case. While we do believe and profess that we worship the one true God, we also recognize that the other gods are real, but in a different way. So we call them false gods. It doesn't mean they're false as in fake news. It means that they are false in that they are a deity, an entity that manifests itself proclaiming to be a god falsely. And these deities, entities, are fallen angels that fell with Lucifer. And they are basically distorting and trying to pull people away from the one true God. And the more I learned about this, the more it made sense. So in the Old Testament, when the Israelites were going through the lands, God did warn them to avoid worshiping Moloch. Who's Moloch? He's actually the god of abortion, the god that is worshipped today. So back during the Israelite era, many thousands of years ago, as they were going through and taking the land of Israel that God had promised them, people, including certain Israelites that were led astray, certain people, I should say, were worshiping Moloch, and in the form of a bronze statue, and his hands were like this. So what people would do is they would heat the hands up on the bronze statue to a scalding temperature, and they would place their child in the hands of Moloch, and the child would die. And God warned to not worship Moloch because it would be profane against God. But you see it everywhere. People are worshiping false gods. They sacrifice their children for the sake of money, for the sake of greed, social status, etc. And yes, I know the main selling point for Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics and contraception is, well, what about rape? I know that's a statistical fact that there are those situations. However, if you take time to look at abortion stories, most of them are about money. It's sad. And I understand that women who are raped and suffer and victims of incest aren't likely to go and say, yes, I had an abortion because of this. I understand that. But also statistically, the percentage of rape victims and incest victims that seek abortion do not justify the widespread use of abortion. All right, so thanks for listening to that TED Talk. But nonetheless, where I'm going with this is that those gods are being worshipped today in many ways. We have money, greed, social status, abortion, so many other things, other means, other things that people idolize. And these deities that were around, they were the Roman gods, the pagan gods, the Norse gods, the Egyptian gods, which all have quite a few parallels because, hey, look at that. They are actually the same deities manifesting under different cultures, traditions, names. Just like the Aztecs, they were worshiping a sun god that they felt the need to sacrifice children for. So a lot of similar trends between these various world religions, even though they were separated by oceans. So anyway, to get back to the point, this was important to me because I learned that, oh, there's actually a whole broad element where everything is tied together through the lens of Christianity in a way that it really does make sense. It was very helpful for me to see that and realize that, oh, so all this stuff that we thought that, oh, you are calling others fake religions. Nope, you weren't really renouncing them in that way. It was that they were making false acclamations that they were the one true religion when they're not. So that was a lot of my background, a lot of my theological understanding. And so, like I said, the more I learn about Christianity, the more I learn about the Catholic Church, the more I confirm that Christianity is the one true religion because Christ is King and the triune God, the Holy Trinity, is the one true God. You look at the creation stories between different religions, the only one that actually mirrors what science has been able to find is the Genesis story. When you strip away what I had said about 7 days being 7 calendar days in the earthly world, and you look at the 7 stages, it is startling how closely the findings in the Hubble telescope mirror the book of Genesis, the creation story. Very similar out of all the other creation stories. And if you look at the other creation stories there, even without considering sin from the viewpoint of Christianity, just looking at natural order and natural law, there's a lot of violations of the natural law in the other creation stories. I'll end this by quoting something my priest told me about a story about another atheist who converted. He was an atheist, and this gentleman was an atheist, and he went to golf with a conservative Christian friend, unbeknownst to him that his friend was Christian. And so his friend was inquiring with him about his religious beliefs. And he told him, he said, I'm an atheist. And so his friend said, well, why are you an atheist? What do you think of the Bible? And he said, well, I think it's all lies. So his friend confronts him a little more. He said, what part of the Bible do you think is a lie? His friend, and the atheist said, well, I can't really say which part. And his friend said, have you read it? He said, nope. So his friend said, that is the most moronic thing I have ever heard of. You are not an atheist. An atheist is someone who researches religions, looks into their scriptures, researches the history and religious structures in the past, and then after researching everything, determines there is no God. I welcome you to also learn about religions and hopefully leave the moronic state that I was in, because I too was a moron. I thought I knew it all. I had all these assumptions, as does one of my atheist friends who seems to be interested in my little journey. And he too, when I started reading the Bible, he said, I never made it through Genesis. Well, look at that. So I welcome you. Read the scriptures, look at history. We all have our ways to get through to God. I welcome you to try and find out your path. I will pray for you, that God may bless you, keep you, and guide you.